Kentucky. This is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Kentucky may consider adding a murder charge to drug dealers that can be linked to overdose deaths. That bill was filed last year but did not get much traction. Richmond's police chief testified in support of the bill today, but some fear it could also lead to unwanted consequences for people in some drug cases. WYMT's Phil Pendleton has more on what was discussed.
So I'm glad to be able
Richmond's
to
police chief says they're averaging about one overdose death a week.
We have to do something. Law enforcement has to have a tool in order to charge these individuals to hopefully put a stop to what we're seeing.
Many of the overdoses are treated as crime scenes, with often parents showing up there and waiting for answers and eventual convictions.
And they're mad at law enforcement. They're angry that we're not doing more.
And House Bill 388 did not get very far in this past year's session. Even the sponsor said it was mainly just to get the conversation started. It was introduced in the House, but never received a vote in committee. If passed, police could charge drug dealers with murder.
If we take away, if you will, the fear of some type of punishment for these people that are dealing, then they're just going to go even more wide open, and they're going to be pushing it even harder.
The bill is opposition from a group representing public defenders. They say fear of prosecution will prevent some from reporting overdoses.
Hopefully, somebody's going to call 911 and say, we have an overdose here, get to this child. I'm afraid that if it becomes widely known that you can be charged with murder, that's not going to happen.
The bill could be voted on and receive more support in the longer 2024 session. In Frankfort, Phil Pendleton, WYMT Mountain News.
Supporters say this bill is modeled after those in 20 other states, including Arkansas, which has a law called death by delivery. In a surprise decision, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against an Alabama congressional map that civil rights groups said discriminated against black voters. The justices, in a 5-4 split, said the state's Republican-drawn congressional map likely violated the 1965 Voting Rights Act, siding with a lower court decision. Legal analysts say the decision upholds a key provision of the landmark law.
What the court said today is Section 2 of that landmark 1965 Voting Rights Act, it will still guard against at least the most egregious types of racial gerrymandering. What does that mean? It means you're drawing district lines to reduce voting power on the basis of race.
Conservative Justices John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh sided with the court's 3 liberal justices in the decision. The ruling means Alabama officials will have to redraw the state's congressional map with an additional majority black district. The case had been closely watched for its impact on the U.S. House and the Voting Rights Act. The White House will host what it calls its largest Pride celebration ever, with LGBTQ families from across the nation. At the event this evening, President Biden will announce several actions aimed at protecting people in the LGBTQ+ community. The Pride celebration will take place on the White House South Lawn. Kentucky State Senator Karen Berg and Chris Hartman, the executive director of the Fairness Campaign, will both be at tonight's event. Former President Trump is fighting the verdict which found him liable for sexual abuse just weeks after a court ordered Trump to pay writer E. Jean Carroll $5 million. Trump is asking a Manhattan judge for a new trial. Trump's lawyers have filed a motion arguing the trial did not prove Carroll's accusations of rape in a department store dressing room in the 1990s. The motion also argues Carroll did not prove her reputation was damaged by a social media post denying the claims. Trump also asked the judge to lower the $5 million damages award to less than $1 million. The prime suspect in the disappearance of Natalee Holloway is headed to the United States. Joran Vandersloot was handed over to the FBI in Peru today, nearly 20 years after Holloway's disappearance. He's being flown to Alabama, where he will face charges related to a reported extortion plot connected to the high-profile case. Vandersloot has never been prosecuted for kidnapping or murder in the Holloway case, but he has been indicted on federal allegations of wire fraud and extortion. He's accused of lying to Natalie's mother, Beth Holloway, and taking $25,000 from her in exchange for information about the location of Natalie's body. Vandersloot completed less than half of his 28-year prison sentence in Peru for the killing of another woman in 2010 before the transfer. He'll be returned to complete that sentence once his trial in Alabama is finished. 2 of the 5 New Haven, Connecticut police officers involved in the 2022 arrest of Randy Cox have been fired. Video showed Cox being transported handcuffed in a police van and hitting his head after an abrupt stop, leaving him paralyzed from the chest down. The city's Board of Police Commissioners voted Wednesday to dismiss officers Jocelyn Lavandier and Luis Rivera over the transportation incident. The commissioners found they violated the, quote, general orders of the police department. It comes after the city's police chief recommended the termination of all 5 officers in March. 2 other officers will appear before the board later this month.
Well, we talked about how beautiful the weather has been out there today, and that continues as we head into this evening. Here's the view from downtown Hazard. Temperature 72. Folks lining up at the farmers market there as we work through downtown. So looking pretty nice out there. You kind of see a little bit of a haze there as a little bit more of that wildfire smoke starts to work in. You can definitely see it as we push 70 on the Pikeville Medical Center camera, but still brilliant sunshine at this hour. In the upper 60s, Pikeville into portions of Clintwood, Virginia. Wise even cooler than that. Everybody else, low to mid 70s. It is a truly gorgeous day outside. A clean sweep on Pinpoint Doppler. Nothing we'll have to worry about weather-wise through the evening. You see plenty of clear skies as we run through tonight, down into the low 50s by 5 o'clock, and a lot of us are going to settle into the upper 40s, even some of the sheltered valleys in the mid 40s as we head into the morning. Now, we've got more days like this ahead, and we also have some rain chances in the next 7 days. I'll break that all down in a few minutes. Steve?
Evan, thank you. More than 10 months after the flood last July, we're seeing more and more groups make their way back to eastern Kentucky. One group in Knott County this week drove for 2 days all the way from Nebraska. WYMT's Olivia Calfee has that story.
41 volunteers from across the state of Nebraska say they have made it their mission to ensure people don't feel forgotten.
There are still groups out there that focus more on the long-term recovery, that, you know, this is what we do. We don't go into places in the immediate days after and clean up, but we come in and try and help rebuild and help them get their lives back.
Explaining that for some of them, this is not their first trip to eastern Kentucky since last July 28th, but they wanted to come back to continue to rebuild.
I can't imagine the idea of how far the creek rose when it flooded and what, you know, what that was like, and just to hear how a lot of them, their faith has really still pulled them through. You know, yes, a lot of bad things happened, but it could have been worse.
From home repairs to new roofs and even rebuilds, this Central Nebraska mission team says they just want to do more.
Every day you look at the clock, you go, man, I feels like I've been here for 2 hours and I've been here all day. I just wish I could give more time and serve more.
And one 14-year-old volunteer says she's inspired by the strength and resiliency she has learned from each person she has met, hoping to leave a little bit of her own encouragement for her new Kentucky family.
Y'all are some of the strongest people I've ever seen, because you guys just had a flood go through your entire town and it destroyed a lot of people's homes, and yet y'all keep fighting and stuff, and I've seen like just great heart and determination.
With plans to continue making their way back to the mountains. In Knott County, Olivia Calfee, WYMT Mountain News.
The group is staying at Heinemann Methodist Church. They have been on the ground working since Monday.